The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
We are now about to witness the truth.
it's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Thursday, May 25th, 2017. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, I'd like to begin the show thanking our patrons, those who make it possible, even in the midst of the YouTube ad-pocalypse. Our patrons are the ones who are carrying us the distance, and we give you every morning a live stream where we talk about some of the stories off the record that I don't necessarily want to put on the record, but if you want to be a part of that inner circle, go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron for like $3 a month. I think I'm worth a cup of coffee a month, right? Contrary to some popular belief. I'm sure somebody would disagree with me. There's a lot happening in the news we want to discuss today. I want you to weigh in on the conversation as always, 857-600-0518. In addition to calling in, you can leave a voicemail or you can leave a comment in our chat room and we will pull your comment up on the screen for us to discuss. Let's start with the breaking news. Jared Kushner is under investigation. Jared Kushner is the son-in-law of President Trump. He is also a special advisor to President Trump. He has been overseas with the president on his first overseas tour since becoming the president back in January. Investigators are focusing, according to the Washington Post, on a series of meetings that Jared Kushner had as a part of their probe into the Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Kushner had a series of meetings in December after the election. He had a series of meetings in December with the Russian ambassador and a banker from Moscow, and is being investigated because, quote, of the extent and the nature of his interactions with the Russians, according to the Post. Kushner is the only White House official known to be considered a part of the key probe. This is the highest the actual investigation has gone. In addition, according to the Post, in addition to the coordination between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign, they're also looking into Jared Kushner into possible financial crimes. So this is over and above the Russian meddling or allegations of Russian collusion. This is whether or not he has some type of financial crimes in his portfolio. Now, at the time of his meetings, as I said earlier, this was after the election. And so ordinarily, there would be nothing wrong with someone who's going to be a potential advisor to the president of the United States to engage in conversations with a Russian ambassador or anyone for that matter. The problem is that during his security clearance, he did not disclose this information. And now his attorney said that this was just a minor oversight. How do you make an oversight in the midst of all of the ongoing allegations that started before the election? How do you make that mistake? If you know that the FBI, and even if they're not the FBI, you know the American people are looking at you and considering some possible collusion, how do you make the mistake? How do you make the mistake of inadvertently not reporting that you had meetings with Russians? And again, I want to be clear, this may not be necessary, but I want to make sure, because we've drug out this Russia story so much that we are getting into the realm where just saying the word Russian is considered to be an insult. I don't use it as such in any way on this show. I just use it as a means of describing their nationality. They're Russian, right? So how do you make the mistake when all of America is intruding and looking with a microscopic lens at all of your activities with regard specifically to Russia? How do you forget to disclose the fact that you had a series of meetings with Russians? Again, as I stated, Jared Kushner was on a trip with the president as he went overseas to meet in Saudi Arabia and to meet with the Pope, but he and Ivanka left early to come back to the United States. Now, we can only speculate as to why, but the timing seems to be rather serendipitous. The fact that he is now back or on his way back to the United States, just as NBC News broke the story that he is underneath investigation from the FBI. So we'll keep our eye on that story as we progress. Additional bad news for President Trump. He's not having a lot of winning. The Muslim ban, or if you want to call it a travel ban, has been knocked down again by a federal appeals court on today. They left in place the freeze that was instituted previously in the last executive order. So the broad ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit means that the Trump administration will not be able to enforce their travel ban. Jeff Sessions, of course, has jumped into the fray. He says that he's going to take this directly to the Supreme Court. Sessions also went on and said that President Trump is, quote, well within his lawful authority to keep the nation safe and is not required to admit people from countries that sponsor or shelter terrorism until he determines that they can be properly vetted and do not pose a security risk to the United States. This is our Attorney General. So the decision today was a 10-3 decision on the Fourth Circuit, and the language I found pretty fascinating. I really enjoyed the language from the decision. They said that they found that the travel ban was, quote, in context, drips with religious intolerance, animus, and discrimination. They decided that the president cannot go unchecked when, as here, the president wields through an executive edict that stands to cause irreparable harm to the individuals across the nation. And so it leaves in place a nationwide injunction issued, according to the Washington Post, issued in March by the U.S. District Judge Theodore Chang in Maryland. So this really kind of hinges on the language that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani used throughout the campaign and subsequently after the campaign. The question was raised, how long will President Trump be held accountable for his words, where he expressly said that we're going to shut down the immigration of all Muslims into this nation until we can figure out what the hell is going on. And so this is where the decision, this is how the decision was made in all of the previous court cases. And again, it's carried out the same exact way. The intent of the president of the United States must be or is being incorporated into the decision, deciding that whether or not President Trump admits it on paper at this point, they're able to look back into the extent and the full body of his work during the campaign and that of Rudy Giuliani, who went on television after the fact. This is how smart they are. Sarcasm. He went on to television after the fact and said that President Trump wanted to know how he could legally institute a Muslim ban. And so that conversation was incorporated into this, and ultimately they came up with a decision that says that the travel ban, quote, in context, drips with religious intolerance, animus, and discrimination. So now we're at the point where they are going to go to the Supreme Court. A challenge must go before Chief Justice John G. Roberts. He will receive an emergency petition from to be seen with regards to this case. The interesting thing about this, it'll be interesting to see how it's divided in the Supreme Court, where the different justices fall on this. In the case that was just decided today in a 10-3 decision, everyone on the 10 of the justices who decided against this, they were all appointed by a Democratic president, and 4 who wanted to allow the ban were all appointed by a Republican president. Judges matter. Absolutely matter. And a lot of times we try to act as though justices are above the political fray. If that was the case, then we likely would not have to go through the confirmation processes that we go through because of all the questions that are asked and all of the positions that need to be put on record. Justices and judges, they absolutely matter, which really should shine a light on how precarious of a situation progressivism is in right now, with the fact that Donald Trump is getting ready to appoint, I believe, almost 120 judges, most of which, if not all, I'm sorry, I think we can concretely say all of them will be conservative judges. And if any other seat becomes available on the Supreme Court, he's going to stack it with conservative justices. And so, as you can see with this decision today, which was essentially decided down party lines, we really don't use that language with regard to this to any court. But in this case, the 10 that were against the travel ban were all appointed by Democrats. The 3 that were for it were all appointed by Republicans. We can say that this decision was along party lines. And now we have a president who has the authority to appoint so many more judges. We have to see how far and how long those ramifications, how far and how long we have to live with those ramifications. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the conversation. We are blowing through these stories pretty quickly. Want to slow down, fill up some time. Not really. Let's keep going. All right. Donald Trump is an oaf. Let's just start there. Donald Trump is Nelson from The Simpsons if Nelson was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Like this video that we're going to play 2 different videos. The first one we're going to play is a video of President Trump absolutely pushing the Prime Minister of Montenegro out of the way so that he can be in front and center and shine at the NATO summit that he was attending today. It is absolutely something to see. It goes by pretty quickly, but I want you to see exactly how he busts through and then, pops his collar essentially like nothing happened. Instead of me describing, let's just take a look at it. Here he is. And all right, that's it. It's pretty short. We're going to run it again because I don't want you to miss it. I want you to look at the expression on the face of the Prime Minister from Montenegro. He's like, oh, what just happened? And then he realizes, oh, it's nobody but Donald Trump. But Donald Trump, really, he's the kid at school who pushes everybody out of the way so he could get the first piece of cake or something. I don't know what's going on. But this is the president of the United States. This is who we have elected. This is not an ordinary human being. This is a man-child in every sense of the phrase. I mean, how else can you explain busting through the crowd so insecurely so that you could be front and center like this? I mean, this, and then pops his, nothing happened. This is who we've elected. For America, we have played ourselves, and this is the symbol of American exceptionalism abroad. This is what the world is now seeing is what we consider to be exceptional. This is the best that America could do. This is our representative to the free world. This is the most powerful man in the world. He's more concerned with being in the front of the line. I mean, let's be reasonable. For all intents and purposes, it's pretty safe to say that everyone would have turned and looked for the president of the United States and would have said, come on to the front. Or even before they stopped walking, they would have yielded to the president of the United States. Donald Trump doesn't realize he's the president of the United States. Donald Trump thinks that he still has to push his way through for him to be seen because he thinks that's an alpha male thing to do. I don't know what the hell he's thinking here. But the power of the presidency, and we're just going to talk in context of the way the world is right now. Not the way we want the world to be, not all the problems we see, but just the way the world is right now. The power of the presidency doesn't need an oafish man to push people out of the way to be noticed. The power of the presidency is simply the power of the presidency. You don't get the title of the most powerful man in the world by pushing people out of the way so that you can be front and center. This is, and I know we're laughing, but this is on so many levels embarrassing. This is embarrassing to have this man of this caliber, an oaf, a buffoon, to be our representative to the world. All right, so let's talk about the substance of what happened at NATO. Everything else, I guess, is low-hanging fruit. So the number one thing, 2 things happened today that jumps out that we have to discuss. Number one, if you looked at the trip of Donald Trump so far, as he's gone through Saudi Arabia and he's gone to Israel and he's now speaking in front of NATO, you notice his demeanor changed significantly at each stop. And his language changed significantly at each stop. In Saudi Arabia, he had nothing but glowing remarks, nothing but positive things to say. You would think that Saudi Arabia is our best ally in the world, the way he treated the king and the way he treated his host. But when he got to NATO, the summit today, he took it upon himself to chastise our partners, our allies, very directly and very harshly. And this is what the president had to say to our allies.
I have been very, very direct with Secretary Stoltenberg and members of the alliance in saying that NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense.
Now, what he's referring to is the agreement that every member nation is going to pay up to 2% of their GDP into their mutual defense. And he has correctly identified that about 23 of the 28 nations have not done so. This has been something that he harped on throughout the election. This is not only something unique to Donald Trump, but also President Obama has mentioned previously that every nation as a member of NATO needs to step up and do what they're called to do. But Donald Trump goes one step further with this lecturing. And in many respects, as you hear reports and different articles about this, the members of NATO, they stood there graciously and they accepted it because what are they going to do? Challenge the president right there or show some sign of being upset? But in reality, they're very concerned not only by his desire to chastise him, but also they're concerned with the fact that he did not mention or reference Article 5, America's commitment to Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which is the Mutual Defense Clause, which means if someone attacks a member of NATO, then the United States will step in and support that nation, or not only the United States, but every member nation. The only time Article 5 has been evoked since its creation was 9/11. And so we have on the books an account of the United States invoking the Article 5 and all of the member nations coming to aid the United States. And in fact, that's what they were celebrating today. They were at a memorial for all of the fallen soldiers of the war in Afghanistan for which NATO members sent troops. And so in this space where they are there to commemorate the Afghanistan war, where other nations sent troops and other nations' troops died, President Trump found that it was fitting for him to chastise them on an issue that could have been addressed at any other time, but he saw fit to do it at this memorial when they were commemorating the people from other nations and the United States who died in Afghanistan as a result of the war that came after 9/11. And so this was just part of his speech. I want to play the next part. Listen in to the second half of his comments.
This is not fair to the people and taxpayers of the United States. And many of these nations owe massive amounts of money from past years and not paying in those past years. Over the last 8 years, the United States spent more on defense than all other NATO countries combined. If all NATO members had spent just 2% of their GDP on defense last year, we would have had another $119 billion for our collective defense and for the financing of additional NATO reserves.
All right, so the expressions, I'm laughing because of the expressions on the faces of the prime ministers that you saw there. It's either in amazement that Donald Trump is doing this, or it's just, they're mocking him on the side. I don't know what that was, but it was hilarious. But to the meat of the substance of what's going on here, I was listening to a report from NPR NewsHour, and I also read an article on this. This is not just an abdication of the responsibilities of the member nations. Right? Many of the nations have presented plans to show that they are going to keep their commitment, which must be met by 2024. So this is not an annual commitment per se, but it's a commitment generally that must be met by 2024. And all of the member nations have set out plans for the generals, the Secretary General, showing that they're going to meet their commitments by 2024. Now, more than the nuances or the specifics, not the nuances, but more than just the specifics, here's the issue for me. You can see that Donald Trump, if nothing else, was prepared to have this speech with this group and to not condemn them, that's maybe too harsh, but to criticize them in this fashion. And in the context of giving this criticism, and as well as for the first time since the inception of NATO, the first time the President of the United States has not spoken to the commitment to Article 5, you have to pause and ask yourself, who does Donald Trump really consider our allies? That, you know, I've heard so much of the Russia conspiracies that it's almost laughable to me at this point. Everybody is Russia, Russia, Russia. You know, turn on MSNBC and everyone is like, Donald Trump is a Russian stooge. You know, he's either a Manchurian candidate or he's a willful stooge of Russia. And the issue I have with it is the combination of all the things that Donald Trump is doing. The combination of the things that he intentionally does not say, plus what he makes sure, and he goes over and above to dictate the exact amount of money that was lost because of the member nations. It really gives you pause and ask, where is Donald Trump's head with regards to the current alignment in the global order? Now, many people in my audience are like, well, you know, forget the global order. The global order is a current problem. I get that. And we've got plenty of videos. We could discuss that ad nauseum and go in depth. But if there's going to be a shift in the global order, we should discuss that. That's something that should be on the table for us to have a robust conversation. And Donald Trump is not signaling a firm commitment to NATO. He's signaling that he has a different agenda with regards to NATO than any other president that we've had in American history. So the question is, where are his true, not allegiances, but who does he consider to be his true allies? Because he did not lecture Saudi Arabia. Let's put a bow around it. Let's bring this together. He did not lecture Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, of anyone he visited this weekend or this week, should have been criticized. He should have been criticizing Saudi Arabia for the human rights violations, for their continued war in Yemen, which we're helping through military aid, for all the things that is wrong with Saudi Arabia. He did not have one damning word to say, not even a single word of criticism, but yet he has all of this criticism for the member nations of NATO. It's moments like this, it's things like these that gives fuel to the Russia narrative. And as tired as you are and I am of the Russia narrative, you got to take a step back and say, okay, Jared Kushner, you had a meeting in January with Russians and you didn't bother to put it on the books, or you didn't bother to put it in your security clearance, when you know that all of America is waiting for just you to make one mistake with regard to the Russians, yet you make this mistake, quote unquote mistake. Number one. And then number two, Donald Trump, you go to the NATO summit and you go overseas on your very first trip. You say nothing to Saudi Arabia, but you have a detailed list of complaints for people that America traditionally considers to be allies. Bring that one back up for me. I want to see that one again. 857-600-0518. Okay, thanks a lot. I thought it was something else. You know, sorry, Lauren. I thought you were trying to come for me. I was ready. I'm sorry. Next time, tell me no. That's all I got to say about it. It would help. Here's the thing. I'll say this last thing. Let me make a correction. So they weren't there for the memorial. There was a memorial in the backdrop, but they were there for the opening of the new NATO headquarters. So I want to make sure I make that correction now before I get too far away. But here's the last thing I'll say about this. Russia probably could have gone away by now. the Russian narrative that is sucking the life out of every news cycle could have gone away by now if not for the things that Donald Trump is inadvertently and intentionally doing. So at what point do we take a step back and say, since Donald Trump is the one who's actually exacerbating this Russian narrative with all of his missteps and intentional things that he does, then we need to actually ask some questions about his relationship with Russia. Because I would like for it to go away probably more than you, but Donald Trump's behavior actually exacerbates it even more. Let's take this first caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, this is Brianna.
Hey, Brianna, how are you? What's on your mind?
I just want to say real quick, I believe who he considers allies, are who's going to make the most money for my wallet. Like if you look at Saudi Arabia, he has hotels in Saudi Arabia. If you look at Russia, he has made deals with certain Russian companies and stuff in that matter. So I'm guessing who he considers allies is who does he benefit the most out of it.
I think it's a great question. Yeah.
We can consider that conflict.
Yeah.
We can consider a conflict of interest or not, but that's who I think who he considers his top allies.
Yeah, let's take a second and explore that. Thanks so much for the call, Brianna. And I want to ask the audience that are listening now to leave your comments and call in. Who do you think Donald Trump actually considers to be an ally? I think Brianna's comment might be the simplest explanation of it, right? That he's really just going to go wherever his pocketbook is. That to me makes more sense than a deep-seated conspiratorial kind of Russian Manchurian candidate. Donald Trump's just looking out, and Jared Kushner just looking out for their own personal financial interests. I think there may be some credence to that. What do you think in the audience? Here's a comment from Shane on Facebook. Shane says, the world thinks we, the United States, is a joke because of this guy. We lost all sense of honor and respect with this buffoon as our president. I agree. Donald Trump is, like I said, an oaf. He is a clown. And if this is the best that America can do, we need to start over. If this is the culmination of the American democratic experiment, we may need to start over. We'll get your comments. We'll talk about that. You could chime in through the rest of the night. I want to shift gears and talk about a couple of local stories that I think are very important. The first one is coming out of Mississippi. There are 4 African-American mothers who are filing a lawsuit against the Mississippi Department of Education because of the quality of education or the lack thereof. Precious Hughes is a local mother. This is according to the local NBC News. Her child goes to Raines School in Jackson, Mississippi. Only 15 out of the school's 376 students are at grade level for math. This is a very significant indicator that students and teachers look at to see the caliber of the school. And only 15 out of 376 students are on grade level for math. According to Precious Hughes, she says, quote, the school is dark, gloomy, and uninviting. It feels like a prison. Not even the teachers want to show up because the school has nothing, but that's where we live. And because that's where they live, she has no choice but to send them there. Raines School in Jackson, Mississippi is 99% African American. It's a part of 19 school districts that got an F from Mississippi's school Department of Education, rather. The other 18 schools have about an 81% African American ratio. So this is disproportionately hurting the African American community there in Mississippi. There's a new federal lawsuit that has been filed on Tuesday by Hughes and 3 other parents. 3 other mothers. They claim that all public schools are not created equal. And we're genuinely going back to something from post-slavery, the Reconstruction, not only philosophically in terms of this disparate treatment of people of color in terms of the education system, but also because of the law that they're basing this on. The Southern Poverty Law Center filed the suit on behalf of the mothers. They allege that, according to NBC News, they allege that 2 Mississippi public school districts, the Jackson Public School District and the Yazoo City Municipal School Board District, are not, quote, operating in an obligatory uniform system of free public schools in violation of 150-year-old federal law, end quote. William Bardwell is an attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center. This is what he had to say. He said, quote, "This case is about quality of education and making sure that quality is uniform no matter what color your skin is or where you live." He went on to say, quote, "Mississippi gutted education rights over years and years to avoid integration to the extent that they are now non-existent. We want to change that." And so again, we were saying that this is philosophically, but actually very significantly based on a period. This is reflective of a period in post-Civil War, but the law that they are using to base this lawsuit on is the Readmissions Act. It is an actual Civil War era law that allowed Confederate states to rejoin the Union based on certain conditions. And one of those conditions was not to deprive anyone of an equal opportunity for education. There's a lot to be said about this story because for years, and I'm surprised this can't be the first lawsuit. I'm sure there's been a series of lawsuits over time, but this has been an ongoing problem across the country. Like this it seems to be it seems to have a certain feeling to it because it's coming from Mississippi, but this is a problem across the country. Marginalized communities have marginalized schools. Poor communities have poor schools. It's not just an issue of race, but it's also an issue of class and economics. The fact that your schools are based on, the funding for your schools are based on property taxes. If you're living in a poor community with redlining, with poverty, with slums, with the ghetto, with public housing, it's very likely that you're not going to have a sufficient base for public funding, for schools, funding for your public schools rather. And so this has been an ongoing problem for a long time. And this is usually the case study that people who advocate for charter schools will use in order to say this is why we need school choice. Here's the problem with school choice. School choice doesn't fix the broken schools. It just cherry picks a set of kids to take them out of that public school, along with the funding, take that out of the public school and send them to the private charter school or to the public charter school. It does not fix the situation for all of the people that remain. And in a school like Rain School, where only 15 out of 376 schools are on grade level for math, those 15 probably would be good candidates to go to a charter school and leave the remaining 376 there to suffer in the conditions with even less funding. And so the solution is not in charter schools alone, if at all. And so we'd like to see where this lawsuit goes and what the decision is, but it is so reminiscent of the time where it was just clear cut. No one expected black students to get an equal education. And now we've had, all of this time since slavery, since the Civil War, since Jim Crow, where we have the expectation of equality, but the reality has never existed, not only because of race and the lack of proper integration, but primarily because of the economic conditions that these schools are in and the lack of funding because of the economic conditions that their families live in. 857-600-0518. Let's shift from Mississippi and now go over to New Orleans with a story that I find almost unbelievable. The New Orleans principal, turns out to be an actual literal Nazi. Nicholas Dean, president of Crescent Leadership Academy, was in attendance at a rally on May 7th. You can see the picture in the background. I'll turn a little bit so you can see his picture. Let me scoot over. It's all reversed. There we go. There's Nicholas. You can see him. He's a principal at a charter school in New Orleans, because that's all they have in New Orleans are charter schools. And he is a principal at a high-risk school, dropout prevention school. And these are students who are below grade level. They are at risk. He is a principal, and he's been there for some years. He's been there so long that there was actually an NPR feature on his work. We'll get to the Nazi portion first, but I want you to see how the rest of America and his community got introduced to this principal, Nicholas Dean, via NPR. Here's a segment.
Principal Dean is the first to concede that CLA and its students still have a long way to go.
When they arrive here now, they're on a road where they need to make a change for whatever the behavior was. And many students will blame others for their issue or minimize the issue, mislabel it. And our task and job is to be able to not tell them, not preach at them, not bark at them, not say you should do this, but to ask questions in a way that allow for them to have aha, self-actualized moments.
All right, so that was him on NPR. You know how NPR does these beautiful features of people and stories. You get somebody out of a poor community and someone doing a good job, like the movie Lean on Me. This is how America was introduced to Nicholas Dean. Just this past month, you remember where what's the guy named Richard Spencer, the Nazi, everybody's favorite Nazi, America's in love with this guy, led a rally in front of the Robert E. Lee Memorial in New Orleans to protest the city taking down the monument. And there is the principal. Now, his excuse for being there is fabulous, right? It sounds really good. He said that that he was there not to be on either side. He said, quote, I wasn't there to protest for either side. I went there because I'm a historian, an educator. And he said, I wanted people who know me know that I'm a crusader for children, and I fight tirelessly on their behalf. And now you're looking at a video that surfaced shortly thereafter that shows that, well, maybe he wasn't really there just to be a historian. But if you look at his fingers, he has 2 rings on. 2 rings, one depicting the Nazi SS skull and the other one depicting a German Iron Cross, both which are symbols of the Nazi Party. So he's been chased out of the school. He's been removed. According to the parents, they said that the parents, which have a committee and a board that kind of oversees the school, they said, quote, he will not return as principal or be associated with Crescent Leadership Academy. And this is, again, according to school parent group. They said in a statement on Today. There he is. I mean, so he's introduced to America. Pull up the picture of him looking all nice in front of the students, looking like a gentleman. There he is. There's Nicholas Dean, principal in action, helping all these poor black kids. That's good. Take his ass off. Helping out all these poor black kids. And, you know, in fairness to him, not that I have to be, and it probably won't be past this one sentence, some of the students had great things to say about him. But I wonder if you interview them now, if people would think about how he really treated them, or how he really saw them. I think everybody should have a problem with the fact that there was a literal Nazi teaching and responsible, not teaching, but leading a school for the most underprivileged students in the entire city of New Orleans. And the fact that he was able to cover this up, he would not have been exposed if not for this picture. Prior to this picture that you see behind me, prior to this picture, no one knew exactly his nightlife. In the daytime, he was good old Principal Dean. By night, he was this crusader, and it wasn't, except for this picture, he would still be there as principal of this school. The video clip that we showed you actually didn't have much in way of substance. He was talking about having a conversation about how he spoke with several journalists, and none of the journalists had a good grounding in historical facts from his perspective. It really didn't have much. What stood out in the video that we saw were all of the symbols on his body, and the fact that he denied it just a few days ago. He said, I wasn't there for either side of the conversation. I was there to document history, and here he is, clearly a full-fledged member of whatever organization they consider themselves to be, whatever their official name is, but we know them as Nazis. 857-600-0518. Let's take a couple of questions that we have from the comments section here. This is Shane from Facebook. He said, I feel the same thing is happening in Louisiana too with our failing public school system, mainly due to charter system pushed through by Bobby Jindal. I think Antoine Pierre could speak more to this situation. New Orleans, Louisiana in general, New Orleans is specific. I was blown away with the fact that New Orleans doesn't have any public schools. They're all charter schools at this point. And so there is an agenda to privatized. It really does boil down, and I hate to be overly simplistic, but in many ways, it comes down to the desire to privatize any concept of the public good. So if there's a public post office, they want to privatize it and give it all to UPS and FedEx. If there's a public school, they want to privatize it and give it to entrepreneurs who start schools. And I don't use entrepreneurs in a glowing way in this sense, right? If there's anything public, they want to privatize it. And what that does is, it's a very specific thing. It gives companies the ability to take money directly from the people through the government. The government takes tax dollars and then they pay private corporations to do what the government was supposed to do. Same thing with prisons. It is the responsibility of the government. It is one of the fundamental responsibilities of the government to protect the people and to rehabilitate their criminals. And yet we've seen a trend of abdication of that duty in exchange for turning it over to private corporations. But the private corporations, they don't have to go out and hustle for the profit. They have to just go to the government and say, government, instead of giving me $10,000, instead of you paying $10,000 a head to train the student, give us $15,000 a head and we'll teach the student over here. Antoine Pierce. Yeah, thank you. I said Pierre. I think I meant Pierce, obviously. Let's take a second one. Question from Don. Don said, the problem with education is that we do not adhere to the science of brain development that we know. We are using an antiquated system. It is an authoritarian way to train the masses to comply, which is the opposite of innovation. I would go with innovation there. Absolutely. Yes. So there is an article, and I can't find it. I've been trying to find it for years. I read an article by some random guy with a blog, and it really outlines very beautifully how antiquated our system is. And exactly what Dawn is talking about here, how it is almost, it's like a brute force way of reprogramming our students, specifically to serve an industrial revolution stage, right? And actually, even prior to that, like our school system is really designed for the 18th century. And we're still trying to force this model in the 21st century. So our entire paradigm is broken in a very significant fashion. I taught for many years. I taught some of the same students that Principal, whatever the hell his name was. What was his name? Deans or whatever. The Nazi. Hang on, let me look. Hell, I can't think of his name. Can't find it. Too many notes. Dean. Thank you. Principal Dean, I taught at a school that was just like that. Dropout prevention, people who were 2 years behind, underprivileged, the poorest people, some of them homeless, some of the kids didn't have a place to sleep. And you see that this system isn't working for them, not only because of their economic condition and the place that they find themselves in, but because it just doesn't match the reality of what the 21st century demands. And so until we move from this antiquated way of funding our schools and then move away or simultaneously move away from an antiquated way of teaching, we're going to keep getting the same results with people, with grifters who say, no, the solution is this charter school. Well, yeah, that's the solution for 15 out of 376 students at the Crescent Leadership Academy. That's a great solution for 15 people. What about the remaining? What about the remaining students? What about the people who are left behind with fewer dollars to do what they need to do at their school? Anyway, I didn't mean for this episode to be about education. 857-600-0518. Let's go to one last local story. And this is another tragic story involving the police. Andrew Kearse died in custody because the police assumed he was faking. This on May 11th, Susan Perry, who was 38 years old. This is the article you can find at progressivearmy.com. Be sure to go over there and check it out. On May 11th, Susan Perry, who's 38, and her friend Andrew Kearse were arrested by the police department in upstate New York. They were being pulled over for a traffic violation. Susan Perry told local reporters that police did not believe her when she told them that Kearse, who you see on the screen behind me, was having trouble breathing. This is her quote. She said, "I saw Andrew and the other car, and the two police officers were dragging him out of the car like an animal. And he was lying on the ground motionless. When I called his name multiple times, he didn't respond. He was looking up at the sky, not blinking, motionless." After she was booked for a misdemeanor, and the charge was obstructing governmental administration, whatever, okay. She asked the police what was wrong with her friend. And the police said this, according to her, she said, quote, "They told me that he was faking. Nothing was wrong with him." And according to Perry, she said 15 minutes later, paramedics rushed in with the defibrillator. He received, Kearse, who's on your screen, received medical assistance, but he never regained consciousness and was declared dead later at the local hospital. Kearse has a wife, Angelique Kearse. She told ABC News that she lost her best friend, her soulmate. Her kids are asking where daddy is and what happened to daddy. An investigation into the incident was handed over to the New York State Police, and the state attorney general is presiding over the investigation. According to the local paper there, they said, quote, "En route, Kearse complained of breathing problems, and he said he felt dizzy," according to a city police statement. It went on to say, quote, "Upon arrival at the police department, he was unresponsive, and paramedics from the fire department were immediately called to render treatment." So police brutality doesn't only come in the form of actual abuse and actually striking someone in custody, but it also comes from neglect. And we recall many instances, for instance, in the county jail of Sheriff David Clark, the gentleman who's, and I use that term loosely, the one who's trying to become an assistant at the Department of Homeland Security. It was neglect that killed 4 people. It was neglect to provide water, and people dehydrated. It was a neglect to provide a care for a mother giving birth, and people subsequently died. And this is another case of someone who was informing the police that they were in distress, and yet the police said, "Oh, he's just playing." Subsequently, he died. And again, the police department is involved in investigating themselves. So the question is, what will come of this, if anything? 857-600-0518. I want to know what you think about all of these stories that are happening tonight. There's a lot happening around the world. Join me tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, over at The Real Progressives on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/The Real Progressives. I'll be in a conversation, a discussion with The Real Progressives. They'll be facilitating it. And the lead attorney on the DNC fraud lawsuit case, Jared Beck. So if you want to come and join that conversation, not really sure what it's going to be about, but just come on over, and 7 o'clock Eastern time, I believe, to join us on that Facebook page so we can talk about all the things that are happening in the progressive world. I am going to hold every bit of my commentary till then, but I do believe you want to be there so that you can participate in the conversation. I think it's going to be a great conversation, to be honest with you. So anyway, let's get some low-hanging fruit here. 2 people that I can't stand. I want to start this with my biases. I want to be frank. Sometimes you may have to sort through to figure out who I like or who I don't like. I try to be straight up with you. But 2 people who I do not like, 2 people who are doing a detriment to the United States and aren't even citizens of the United States. Don't even, I mean, they're literally, anyway, Louis Mensch and Milo Yiannopoulos. There was a photo that turned up of the 2 of them together at what's the person who posted it believed they were at the Trump Hotel in New York. The reason this matters, if it matters at all, the reason it matters is because Louise Mensch is like the loudest person pushing the Russia narrative. And when I say the Russia narrative, she's the lead conspiracy theorist. She is on, I don't want to say the cutting edge. I'll say this, she's on the borderline unstable edge of the conspiracy theories around Russia. There's no place that she will not go with regard to Russia. There's no speculation that's too far-fetched for her. She will give fuel to every single thing. And what's bad about Louise Mensch is that she's being promoted by people who really should know better. And so don't get me wrong. I don't like Donald Trump. If he's impeached, so be it. Everybody would applaud. Great, happy day. But there's a threshold of stupidity that I think that we just should not cross. There's a Rubicon of stupidity that Louisa Mensch really has pushed us over the edge. I mean, we have gotten into some really dangerous speculations and some downright silly conspiracy theories. That's who Louisa Mensch is. If you've watched me any significant time, you know how I feel about Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo is a provocateur for profit. He loves making money by saying the grossest things that he could possibly say, the most offensive things that he could possibly say. He loves Donald Trump. He's a Trump boy. He's a MAGA, Make America Great Again. So to see Louisa Mensch and Milo Yiannopoulos in the same place, smiling, chumming together. I don't know if we have the picture of them together. If we could pull that, just the tweet up. It sent off signals for the resistance. And I hate to define all of my terms all the time, but anyone who's been paying attention, the resistance is the Democratic opposition towards Donald Trump. And this is what Yiannopoulos shared as a result of a person named Robin on Twitter. At the bottom, I want to read the bottom first. She said, Mensch and Milo at the Trump Tower right after the election. It was on this day that she began her Trump-Russia resistance infiltration for Murdoch. I'm assuming she's referring to Rupert Murdoch. This is Milo Yiannopoulos' response that was above that past tweet. He said, it's the Waldorf Astoria, not the Trump Towers, but otherwise correct. She promised to take the Trump opposition so violently off into conspiracy theory and lunacy that he'd be guaranteed a second term. Safe to say she has delivered. Yeah. So this presents a small problem for me because we honestly have zero reason to believe anything Milo Yiannopoulos says. Milo would gladly take this as an opportunity to undermine someone who's trying to undermine Donald Trump. But Louisa Mensch is I keep trying to avoid using ableist language, but she's crazy as shit. She's really, and she's admitted it. She said, like, there's a video of her saying that she did so many spectacular drugs in the past that it really messed with her mental health. And I'm gonna be honest with you, some of the stuff that she speculates on and the way that she speculates about them is disturbing. What's more disturbing is the fact that she's carrying a large segment of the Democratic Party and liberals in general into this psychosis state of constant conspiracy theory. I mean, I don't believe anything that Milo Yiannopoulos says, but damn it, the only thing that makes sense about how unstable Louisa Mensch is, if she's not unstable, then maybe she actually is an agent provocateur, sent here to just drum up the craziest, most asinine thing that you ever heard. There's no conspiracy theory. She is quite literally the Pizzagate of Russia. That's what she does. I hope my audience knows what Pizzagate is. Actually, your life would be better if you didn't know. But this is what she represents. This is what she represents. Fuck it, just get in trouble. She is so unstable with the way she presents this, gathers this information. She presents this information, and people, because they hate Donald Trump so much, they have latched hold to her narratives, and here we are with just this rabidly conspiratorial state in American politics where you have someone who's not even American. She's from the UK. She's an interloper. She was a conservative in England. She's a part of the Tory party. She is not a progressive. She's not even a liberal in the international sense. And yet she's here making everything obscenely about the most crazy conspiracy theories that you can imagine. So the only thing that actually makes sense, if we were to take a step back and say, well, let's not insult her, let's not call her crazy, let's not be ableist, maybe she's not crazy. Well, if she's not crazy, she is an agent provocateur sent here, just like Milo said. I don't really have a reason to believe either one of them, but really what I'd like in this situation is like that scene from the movie, the not King Kong, what's the Japanese movie where I can't think of the movie. Anyway, there's a movie where, and in the movie, you have two monsters fighting each other. You hate both of the monsters. Both of the monsters are going to be a detriment to society. Both of the monsters really should be destroyed. But Godzilla, thank you. Godzilla's fighting, let's say King Kong for the lack of, I didn't actually see the movie. I just know this one meme from the movie. When you see two people who are equally detrimental to society fighting it out, you take a step back and you let them fight. I hope for the sake of America that these two Brits, these two interloping, opportunistic, conspiratorial Brits will destroy each other and leave America to handle our deeply seated problems on our own without the help of Louisa Mensch or Milo Yiannopoulos. That's all I've got tonight. We'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.